The first of these is Shuttlesworth's undiluted, I'm not saying diluted as in delusion, I'm saying diluted as in not mixed with anything else. In June 1956, after Alabama issued an injunction against the NAACP, outlawing any activities by that organization within the borders of the state of Alabama, church members and other members of other churches came to Shuttlesworth because he was president of the membership committee of the NAACP. And don't do that, we'll go to sleep. That sounds too much like a lullaby. Anyway, they came around and what can we do? What can we do was a constant question. For days, Shuttlesworth meditated about it, prayed about it, met with ministerial friends to discuss what might be done. And then one night, in the middle of the night, he was awakened and heard a voice. Now, he didn't hear that voice with his ears. Okay? Don't make that mistake. When people say that, at least when historians say that about their subjects, they're not usually, 99% of the time, they're not talking about the subject actually hearing the voice. It's a voice in the heart, if you will. And the voice essentially said, it's time to do something, it's time to form an organization that will take the place of the NAACP. A number of younger ministers who were his friends were immediately in, and they discussed it, and they eventually called a mass meeting and formally founded the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. But not all ministers in town were excited about this idea. The Reverend Luke Beard, the pastor of the 16th Street Baptist Church, notice which church I'm talking about, he even came by and told Shuttlesworth that God had told him to tell Shuttlesworth not to start this new organization. And Shuttlesworth's response was, well, Doctor, since when has God been sending my messages through you? When they put together their formal principles, they denounced the idea of gradualism. And in his speech, he told the audience, we want a beginning now. We've already waited 100 years. That's 100 years since the Emancipation Proclamation. That doesn't count. That doesn't count the 300 years of slavery before that. And it doesn't count the 100 years of Jim Crow after that. And so this organization became the centerpiece of the movement in Alabama, founded in June of 1956. By January of 1957, Dr. King resigned his pastorate in Montgomery and went to be the associate pastor at his daddy's church. I think y'all probably know the name of that church. You certainly do if you live in Georgia. And its pastor is running for senator. If you're from Georgia, please vote. If you're from Georgia, please vote for him instead of the football player. Nothing against football. A a few too many hits to the head, I'm afraid. I'm not kidding. You should hear, you should hear some of the stuff he said. Right after the Montgomery boycott, won its case before the Supreme Court in December of 1956. A month or so after that, the SCLC was formed in Atlanta. Craig Shuttlesworth was there and was elected one of the original officers. I think he was Secretary-Treasurer. But backing up a month to when Shuttlesworth learned that the Supreme Court had ruled out bus segregation in Montgomery, well, he said, well, if it's unconstitutional in Montgomery, it must be unconstitutional in Birmingham, 100 miles north. And so he decided that he would announce to the Birmingham Transit Company and the press that his followers would give the transit company until Christmas Day to change their policy. A similar policy would have been going on in Montgomery, where blacks sat at the back of the bus. They paid at the front, had to come out, go in the back door. Sometimes the bus left while they were walking to the back door. And Shuttlesworth said, if that change hasn't taken place by Christmas Day, we will begin boarding the buses on December 26th, and we will sit in a first come, first served basis. Christmas Day came, policy stayed the same. The Shuttlesworths went to church that day. They opened their presents, and that night they showed off their presents to their one of their favorite deacons, Charlie Robinson, who'd come to visit. While the kids and the wives were in the back of the house, Charlie and Fred were in the front of the house. Fred was reclining on his bed, which was just right about where that corner is, except 1 foot over, because the house was that close to the church at the time. And about 9:40, Ricky, I think he told me this, heard a thud coming from the front of the house. Moments later, there was an explosion. Shuttlesworth was essentially carried around the room as if on a magic carpet. The mattress shielded him from the blow, and when the lights came back on, and he found his pants, he went out and greeted a crowd that had already gathered to try to help as much as they could. Some of the people there were carrying guns, which began a nonviolent sermon on the spot by Fred to the young men who were carrying these guns, and essentially his response to this experience, he said, "I knew in a moment that I wouldn't be hurt, and that God was saving me for a purpose, that the Klan had written my name on that bomb, but God erased it off." Police officer came and said, "Reverend, you better get out of town. You don't know these people, what they're likely to do." And Shuttlesworth said, "You go back and tell your Klan brothers that if I can survive this bombing, then I'm here for the duration and the war is on." Essentially, he poured gasoline on the movement to stoke up the fire. This was the first of 3 bombings of Bethel Baptist Church. No one was killed at these bombings. Therefore, the only bombing that the rest of America knows about is the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, which killed 4 little girls. This church was bombed 3 times. Shuttlesworth was here 2 of those times, and managed to survive a second bomb. Later, in a conversation with Dr. King said, if surviving the bomb wasn't God making himself plain, then there's no way he can. Shuttlesworth agreed and said, God just brought the Bible up to date. You don't have to go back to Daniel in the lion's den or the boys in the fiery furnace. Okay? Now, again, historians can't tell you for sure that God saved them. One of my professors said, you can't footnote the Holy Spirit. I always have liked that quote, and I've used it every chance I got. I'd be glad to know that some of my students quoted me every now and then. Years earlier, when he was riding a train to Oklahoma City, a troubled Fred Shuttlesworth prayed. He got out during the ride, he got out of the car, and in between the cars, the wind was blowing in his face and pulling tears out of his eyes. He began to pray out loud. He said, I don't mind if I suffer, but Lord, I just want you to fix me so that I don't worry so much. I think that there has never been a prayer in the history of Christianity more completely answered in the affirmative than that prayer. Because he never had any fear. And it wasn't like he was covering it up or operating in spite of it. It was as if he had none. It was as if he really believed God was going to protect him as long as he was doing this work. And as far as he was concerned, he was invincible. And by the way, he said, tomorrow we intend to ride those buses just like we promised. And he and 100 followers took seats in the front of Birmingham buses. On December 26, 22 of them were arrested. Now from there, Shuttlesworth began to attack every segregation law on the books in Birmingham. He attacked it on every front, was his language. That he was not killed as a martyr to the civil rights movement was not for lack of trying. He told me in interviews, and he told audiences almost in every speech he ever gave, I tried to get killed in Birmingham. He said, I'm going to kill segregation or it's going to kill me. Now this willingness to die for this cause, coupled with his actually seeking out opportunities to confront Bull Connor and confront the segregation laws. Led Andrew Young, he said this to me in an interview back last December. He said Fred Shuttlesworth was the most admired leader of the movement, but also the most avoided. Well, you know, if you're close to somebody who's attacking segregation every chance he gets, there's a chance you could get killed, whether he's invincible or not. He was almost like an action hero in these movies we see. Have you ever noticed that in those action movies, the hero is always getting shot at, but always by bad marksmen? Because they never get hit by a bullet. Okay? Well, apparently that's the way Fred Shuttlesworth was. Literally like an action figure. Now, for this reason, now he could be eloquent behind the pulpit, but it wasn't primarily that gathered, pulled in followers like a magnet. It was his followers came to believe what he believed, that he was invincible because God was protecting him to do this work. Now I can tell you so many episodes in his life where he confronted segregation and put his life on the line. But I don't have time to do all that, because you'd be here all day. And I'm not that eloquent to hold your attention, although it's hard when you have material like Fred Shuttlesworth. But in September 1957, Shuttlesworth announced to the Birmingham Board of Education and to the press that he was going to enroll his children and one other young man at Phillips High School, which was then all white. And he said, we're going to do this on the first day of school. Announced when he was going to do it. Now, 1 week before the first day of school, a young black man with his girlfriend walking downtown, who apparently looked a little like Fred Shuttlesworth, but these were Klansmen and who probably thought all black people looked alike anyway. But these Klansmen rode up, got out of the car, they captured him, pistol whipped him, nearly castrated him, left him in a ditch to bleed to death, and before they left, they said, you pass this message on. This is what will happen to anybody who tries to integrate the schools in Birmingham. Well, there wasn't anybody trying to do that except Fred Shuttlesworth. That was specifically a message for Fred. He went to see the young man in the hospital. But then on the first day of school, he ignored what he saw in the hospital. He took Ricky and Pat. Who else? Nathaniel Lee. Got in the car. Reverend Fife driving. Fred's wife, Ricky's mother, Rudy in the back seat. They pull up to Phillips High School. And insanely, they stop the car, and Fred gets out. 15, 20 thugs are there with baseball bats, bicycle chains. One person who happened to be one of the bombers of the 16th Street Baptist Church was actually videotaped, I think video was going on at the time, but filmed using brass knuckles on Fred Shuttlesworth. He fell to the ground, he almost lost consciousness. A voice, "Get up, I'm not through with you yet." He crawls back to the car. By this time, however, Ruby had gotten out of the car and was swinging her purse, and anyone who came closely trying to give Fred some cover, Reverend Pfeiffer reached across the seat of the car and pulled Shuttlesworth into the seat. Door closed, they go off to the hospital. Shuttlesworth tells the Reverend Pfeiffer, don't run any stop signs. Didn't want to get stopped by the cops on that. They get to the hospital, he's examined. The doctor says there's no sign of an elevated blood pressure and no sign of a concussion. Fred says, "Doc, the Lord knew I lived in a hard town, so he gave me a hard head." The minister's wife, by the way, when she got out of the car, unbeknownst to her until she got to the hospital, one of those gentlemen in the hoods, oh, well, they didn't have hoods on, but they might as well have, stabbed her in the butt. And the adrenaline kept her from realizing this until they got to the hospital and they saw the blood on the back of her dress. So at the press conference, the minister said, "This is the price you have to pay for freedom." And the minister's wife said, the only thing that bothered her was that she wouldn't be able to show off her scar at church. Oh, come on, Ruby, show us. Excuse me, I got to put in my number here to get my thing to come back on. So, this is the secret of his leadership. Again, yes, and I'll mention some of it in a moment. He could inspire people with his words from the pulpit. But it was these crazy, brave actions on behalf of working class blacks that won him the Father. James Armstrong, his barber, compared Shuttlesworth to Cant. And he said it this way. Now Martin knew how to say it. But Fred know how to do it. I've had good preachers preach to me, but Fred has preached to me in action. That's why one of the other ministers, Reverend Gardner, said, we needed somebody in Birmingham who couldn't lose nothing but his life. And that person was Fred Shuttlesworth. Some years ago, the movie Glory, if you've never seen it, go back and watch it. It's a story of the 154th, or the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, the first black regiment in the Civil War. Near the end of the film, they're about to go up against the Confederates in South Carolina on a beach called Fort Wagner. It's a suicide mission, and they all know. The night before, they're sitting around a campfire, and they begin to sing religious songs, and every so often they'll stop and someone will give a testimony. And the character played by Morgan Freeman, he told how much he loved the rest of the guys in the circle. And then he said, if tomorrow is that great getting up morning, then let's let our loved ones know we went down standing up. You don't feel the little tears coming to your eyes. You know how to know about it. Historian Gerald Linderman called that experience of Civil War soldiers embattled courage. And Shuttlesworth, in the Second Reconstruction, showed an embattled courage, pure and undiluted, one that made him willing to go down standing up for justice and equal rights. And if we Americans, as we always do, on patriotic holidays, we say to those in uniform, thank you for your service. And we celebrate and mark the sacred places on foreign shores where some of them died. If we do that, it is more than appropriate that we celebrate and mark as sacred the places like this church. In a struggle to extend freedom on our streets, the way men and women in service struggle to defend freedom on foreign shores. Now the second part is big. He showed an undiluted African American faith. I don't know if you know the word spirituality. It doesn't mean in black religion what it means for white folks in America. Because lots and lots of white folks in America say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. You know, which frankly leads me to say, yes, you are religious. You're just religious in private, where you can control what you hear and what you do after you experience your worship experience. And religion means organized religion with other people paying attention to what you say and do. Sometimes helping, sometimes criticizing, but nevertheless, not a Lone Ranger